Welcome to this episode of Inner Power Insights, where we explore the depths of personal growth and empowerment. Today, we are thrilled to have with us Sabastian Enges, a renowned mental conditioning and performance coach who has made waves across North America. Sabastian has successfully mentored thousands of young professionals, honing their leadership and entrepreneurial skills. With a track record of generating hundreds of millions in lifetime value for giants like AT&T, T-Mobile, and Amazon, Sebastian is not just a coach, but a powerhouse in driving sales and customer acquisition. His work has been featured in prestigious outlets such as Yahoo Finance and Fox Business. Sebastian's unique mentality-first methodology empowers individuals to transcend their limitations, fostering freedom and mastery. His approach is rooted in the belief that true success is achieved through self-transformation and hard work. Join us as we delve into Sebastian's insights on becoming the best version of ourselves. So, get ready to be inspired and equipped with actionable strategies that could redefine your path to success. Let's dive in.
Sebastian, welcome to Inner Power Inside. I am so excited that you're here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, this is like in my territory because I am a coach. So, mental conditioning and performance coach. That's who you are. Amazing introduction. You have done a lot of thing in your life, and our listeners are so excited to listen to your advice, to your talking, and to giving them tips, strategy, and techniques so they can build up their life. And that's what you're all about. But I'm going to start with what inspired you to become a performance coach.
You know, that's a great question. I think in some ways, in this particular lifetime, since I was a child, I've kind of taken the role of a coach or a teacher, I think probably is more accurate. Um, I'm passionate about seeing people grow. I love watching people challenge their assumptions. I love seeing people break through what they think is possible for themselves. So that's always been core to who I am. The coaching kind of happened as a result. It kind of goes back to a principle I operate from, but coaching came from developing and growing my business. My business is not a business of one. I have 400 employees across the nation. And in order to get to that level, I've had to show up as a coach to continue to develop and grow my people. And so I think the role of coach came somewhat out of necessity, from just growing and developing my team and being able to expand. And then just right after COVID, I really started saying yes to people who were seeking coaching outside of my world. For the first 10 years, I said no to a lot of coaching, a lot of speaking engagements, and really anything that was outside of my main goal. And right after COVID, we hit our 10-year goal. And so I kind of recalibrated and I started saying yes. And now I coach, probably 10 hours a week now I spend with my clients working with them. And I really enjoy it. It's fun working in other industries. But I think it started with building and developing my own business and then testing out my assumptions about what works and what doesn't, employing principles that over time I was able to see that they were tried and true. And I love seeing people grow. I'm super passionate about people. I'm definitely not a screen guy. I'd rather be in front of people than a screen. And so most of my content, you mentioned IG and TikTok, most of my content to this day is all in front of an audience. It's just recorded in front of teams that I'm speaking to across the nation. And a lot of them is in my office.
Yes, I've seen that. I think that's so cool because especially nowadays after COVID, we were all like virtuals and you're bringing that back face to face. It's nothing is like a face to face. It's amazing how the energy. But I love that you kind of combine the leadership. Any entrepreneur, they're leaders, and you approach that leadership as I'm a leader. I'm also their coach, and I have to teach them, or I have to help them, and I have to be there for them when they need me. And how people separate it, but it's kind of like is any entrepreneur that has a business has role of coach in them.
I think
And
so. Yeah.
yeah, and then you taking that and now teaching the people outside of your business, especially for a lot of entrepreneurs that are just starting. So for young adults that wanted to set up an achievement, set up a goal to build a career, what are some steps that you have to give them in the beginning of the thing? Because I know we're going to talk about the challenges you have been through. Nothing, you make it sound so good. It's not that
Mhm.
easy to do that. But what are some advice would you give for somebody listening right now and saying that I'm starting my business?
Starting my business or just getting started in life?
Well, it kind of goes hand to hand, right?
Yeah, yeah, to a certain degree. Yeah, I would say, excuse me, I'd say early life, so early 20s. And a lot of what I have to say is not always encouraging to my early 20s people, but I would say employ yourself in a way that you're chasing an education, not a paycheck. And for a lot of people, like, well, that's why I went to school. I think most of us are waking up to the fact that school is in no way, maybe there are some exceptions, but as a whole, our current academic system is not preparing people for the real world and giving them the skills they need to succeed. And so when I mean getting an education, I mean working. If you're going to work for someone else, go work for somebody who is where you want to be. Put yourself in an environment where you're in proximity to people that you want to learn and grow from, that have particular skills, mentalities, and characteristics of success that you want. And so I would chase education over a paycheck. And if you're saying, well, that's a luxury, that's a statement of privilege, I disagree. I worked for free in my early life to get around people that could help me get to my goals, and it compounded over time. And I found ways to get by. I mean, we live in a country full of people who we qualify as poor that use $1,000 iPhones and $500 Jordans. So I think our idea of poor is different than most of the world. But I would chase an education more than I would a paycheck in early life, so that I get that compounding effect the older I get. Second, I would plant myself in a business and or a career that has lots of upside, lots of opportunity for growth innately built into what I'm doing, so that I can continue to push myself, continue to grow. And what I have found, we don't always know. Very few people drop in here, I think, with clear purpose and understanding who they are. But purpose is found, and our gifts and callings are found through planting ourselves somewhere where we are growing. And as you grow, what you're naturally good at and what you're naturally passionate about will come out. I explain it this way: if you plant a cherry seed, you are only going to get a cherry tree. You don't have another option. It's every single one of us have those seeds of greatness that will come out of us naturally, as long as we put ourselves in an environment where we can grow. And so it's controlling the conditions and environment for growth. And when you do that, I think you'll start to see that there's lots of things that you'll discover about yourself in that process.
So you have succeeded in your business, but I'm sure you had a lot of times that you went through a lot of challenges. Tell us about some challenges and how you overcome them.
Well, yeah, I started my business coming out of the Great Recession of 2008, so that was fun. At the time when, I mean, the upside was, I think everyone was in a reset and looking to start over, right? A lot of people got their asses kicked. And so there's a lot of uncertainty, but there was a lot of opportunity. And not surprisingly, there was a lot of companies that were started in 2009, 2010, 2011, coming out of the Great Recession, as it was dubbed, that are now massively successful. So I do think that what the old saying goes, the father of innovation is necessity. And so that was a tough time. You know, the credit markets were toast. Stock market was down. Real estate, everything was down. All asset classes for the most part. And then you don't know what you don't know in any entrepreneurial journey. You have to start where you're at, and you have to figure out the rest. And so there's a lot of challenges that come with that. I went through my mom passing away as an entrepreneur, and I talk a lot about decisions over conditions. My dad passed away um, later in my career, but while I was building my business, the early days there were, I call it my dark winter, but 2013, I think I was down to negative $187 in my business bank account, trying to come through for a client. And we were 6 months. I was covering payroll. I wasn't on payroll. I took myself off my own payroll for 6 months. And that was actually, when I look back, that was probably the year after that, we went over seven figures and never looked back, and doubled or tripled our revenue every year since then. I think the quickening that happened and the things that I needed to learn in that season, I look back at now with a lot of gratitude. But depending on who your circle is, when you're going through those seasons, it would be easy to have friends and family tell you, "Oh, just give up. Go do something else. Go get a job or whatever it is." Because when you're suffering and when you're struggling, usually people want to encourage you and give you the easy way out. And it certainly would have been easy. I had an opportunity. It was almost as if the universe was tempting me on my decision of fate here. But I had somebody offer me a high six-digit salary with commission that would have projected me around $300,000, which certainly looked a lot better than not having a salary for 6 months at the time. And I said no. I said, "Hey, I appreciate it, but I think I'm going to figure this out." And we certainly did, and went on to really grow rapidly. I think 3,500% over the next decade was the last stat I read, and won best places to work in Orange County for 10 years. So I think the struggle is often where the lessons are and what develops your character. And I don't want to say that that is necessary, but I haven't seen enough counter examples to give me any conviction that it's not.
I'm so sorry about your parents. And like you said, that's grieving time itself. It's incredible how we go through those type of stuff, and yet you still have this ambition to run your business. So were there a moment that you kind of had to like separate yourself and take a time and say, okay, this is my grieving time and I'm gonna do that, but then I'm gonna get back to business and perform as you do and as you did?
Yeah, I mean, I think allowing yourself, I'll say this, I'll start with this frame. Life is not inherently easy or fair. And I say that because I think it seems to be a base operating assumption that life is supposed to be fair and it's supposed to be easy. And if it's not, either I'm screwing something up or I'm getting screwed. When in fact, that isn't part of the equation. If you live long enough, you will have friends and family pass away, right? Not everybody is guaranteed the same life. Not everybody is guaranteed the same amount of life. It's part of the process of existing. So that's going to happen. Um, you're going to have sickness one way or the other, whether it's with you or people in your family. You're going to have people divorce. Like, rough things happen. It's part of the human experience. My fundamental belief is it isn't what happens to us, it's how we respond to what happens to us that ultimately is going to determine the outcome. And so I do think it's important that you grieve. I'm a huge fan of processing emotion, not denying emotion. It's part of my coaching practice, specifically with men. Women do this too, but men definitely bury their emotions and don't process their emotions, I think, more consistently. At least my experience has been that's the case. So part of the advocation is learning how to be honest about what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, and process it. But don't confuse processing your emotion with an allowance to do whatever you want. And so sometimes I'll see people explain away their poor decisions or explain away something that they did that was not beneficial to themselves and others, explaining that they were emotional. I'm all about it. I'm all about experiencing your emotion. That does not give you the right to do whatever you want because you are emotional. And so I grieved, and actually, to be fair to your question, with my mom specific, I was raised by a single mom. My dad I met later in life. I was already a young adult by the time I met him. My mom hit me really hard because she was my mom. She was one of my closest friends, and we had really had a goal to do some things together in business. And her passing away helped me. I had to recalibrate a lot of my purpose and why, because I realized some of it was tied to helping her. I wanted to retire her. I wanted to take care of her for everything she did for me and my brother growing up. So that one was particularly hard. And for 6 months, I buried my head in work. And it's probably fair to say that was it was so intense, and I didn't know how to process what I was feeling, that the only thing I knew to do was to go be productive. And that helped me process in itself, but also allowed me to get to the point where I had the strength to confront and deal with the loss. And so my mom grieving my mother was really hard. I was in my early mid 20s, 25, I think. And that one hit pretty hard, and it did take me time. And to be fair, it was probably 5 years before it wasn't rough. Um, when every time we go near the annual death date, it's funny how your brain remembers things over time, even weather or conditions around it. But that one took time. But I think grieving is important. I think everyone kind of grieves differently and has their own process, but it is important. Just don't allow your need to grieve or to feel any emotion with an excuse not to show up for your family, your business, and your friends. Maybe that's unpopular to say, and some people would say, well, that's being too hard on yourself. Or I hear lots of stories that deny people of responsibility and accountability, but I don't think it's an or, it's an and. And I think probably what keeps me oriented and keeps me going is there are a lot of people that are depending on me, and there's a lot of people that I need to come through for.
Well, I mean, you did it in a such a productive way, even though you said that it was work, you know. Some people go the other way, either playing victimize and lose everything, or they go to start drinking or taking narcotic and everything just to suppress the pain itself. You know, I think that's gonna take you more to the darker place. I mean, for you at the moment, maybe that was your cop out that's going like, okay, this is how I'm dealing, but at least it was productive. You did work for that, for her legacy and everything else. So that's a healthy way to definitely, I would say, the closest healthy way that you can
Yeah.
deal with grieving. So I
I would
admire you for that. That's good. No, absolutely. So what are some common mental block that your client face and how do you help them overcome it?
common mental blocks. Most of the clients that I work with now are usually in their one of two camps. They're either good and they want to be great, meaning they've had some success, but they've plateaued and they're trying to figure out why, or how do I get through this plateau? Or they're in some kind of drastic change. Drastic change would be they exited their company and they don't know what to do next, or they're going through a big divorce, or they got really sick and are trying to get back in the game. There's some, and I really focus a lot on the big, what I call the big three, which is health, wealth, and relationships, mostly because in all of my coaching, easily 90% of it comes down to one of those three areas. And no matter your definition of success, and I think everyone does have a definition of success, I don't know anyone's definition of success that does not involve being healthy in their body, healthy with their relationships, and financially free. And so I spend a lot of time there. And so the biggest roadblock, I think, is awareness, which my first book will be out hopefully soon. And I'm not going to release it until I'm happy with it, but I continue to chunk away at it. And it's almost entirely on identity and awareness, because those tend to be where people get stuck. They get stuck in their story of themselves, and then they don't have the awareness to evaluate where they're operating from, like their value system, their stories about themselves, the other, the world. And so without awareness, nothing really changes. And so I think that's probably the biggest block in creating opportunity for inviting people into a space where they can start to explore and become curious about who they are and why they are the way they are.
You talk about relationship a lot, but I think the two relationship that is important. One, the first one, I believe, which that's what I teach as well as is within yourself. I guess a lot of roadblock comes in even before you have a relationship with somebody else, whether it's romantic relationship or you know a business relationship, however you look at it. The relationship with itself. A lot of
Yeah.
time, people don't have their own identity of who they are or they don't realize who they are because of the culture or because of where you know how where they grew up or because of religion or because of politics, however you think of it, and we function from that because that's how we raised, and then we don't know who we are, and then by the time you know we hit 30 or 40, you're married with a bunch of kids, and you're like, that's not what I want. You know,
Yep.
like that. I you
100%.
used to talk about your purpose. I'm going to find my purpose. No purpose is not some is lost. you always had it, but I think the first thing you have to do, and I know you talk about that a lot, and that's why the mental part of it coming in, whether they're talking about business with you, or they talk about health, or they talk about a romantic relationship, you always go back to that mindset, that mental, that how who you are. You talk about that a lot. So how important that is, and how one can actually be aware of themselves and what they have to do to quiet that noise outside and say, okay, before I start anything, let me find out who I am and what I want to do.
Yeah, this is such a beautiful question. And this, again, going back to my book, this is really what the book is about. It's closing what I call the identity gap. The identity gap is the delta, or the difference between who we think we are and who we actually are. And this is a lot of the 20s. A lot of people are trying to figure out who they are in their 20s. The American Journal of Psychology, this was like 4 or 5 years ago, agreed to push the age out of adolescence, or recognize the age of adolescence in human beings, to the age of 28 now. And coaching a lot of people in their 20s, I would say that's probably a pretty good number. We're taking longer to mature and evolve, and become conscious. And I think there's a lot of reasons for it. And part of it is sorting through this ideal self. And the ideal self is generally something we inherit from our culture, our religion, our family, the country of origin. Like it's all the story of self that comes with this set of values that may or may not be ours, right? We were told this is what to believe. We were told this is what to value, which is why a lot of people in their 20s go through a pretty tumultuous process of testing those value systems, either consciously or unconsciously, and coming into who they actually are. And so for me, the work then is to help people become more aware of who they actually are and what they actually value. And a lot of that, I think one of the operating principles that I work from in that is, we always do what we value most. And there are very few times that I will use the word always, right? Always and never are not two words that I generally use, because you're going to be inaccurate to some degree anytime you use those words, right? Those are things that are just, they're not always going to be accurate. So I would say it is true that we always do what we value most. And I say it that way as a challenge, because usually somebody will get frustrated and say, there's lots of things that I don't value, right? Like I'd rather spend time with my kids than be away for them for 50 hours in a job that isn't going anywhere. Yet you do it. So why is it that you do it? There is something you're valuing there that tells you it is important enough to do. Our frames that can help us understand ourselves is understanding not that we do things, but why do we do them? Or what is the value system or the need that is being met? What are we operating from that is driving us into our decisions? That's how we awaken. That's how we become aware. And then to take an inventory of those values, we can consciously decide whether we want to continue to operate from that place or not. But most people are operating from subconscious programming and live a lot of their life, if not all their life, that way. After my mom died, I studied, done it twice now, but after my mom died, I studied the regrets of the dying, or just the wishes of the dying. And I've read a book called The Fun in Dying, and there's a couple of other books in that arena, just understanding death, right? Helped me process. And it was astounding to me, the consistencies with people who are on their deathbed, what they value, what they pay attention to, what they wish they would have done. There is a lot of consistencies. And you can kind of reverse engineer that in your own life to go, hey, where may I be making those same mistakes? Or way maybe how I can prevent myself from making those same mistakes. But a couple of them that really stood out. Most people regret the things they didn't do, not the things they did do. Most people wish they would have spent more time with their family, not less. They wish they would have forgiven or said, I'm sorry. They wish they wouldn't have worked so much on their career, and would have spent more time in things that mattered the most, which is not me being anti-career. I think we're at best when we're in service to others, but I think a lot of things need to be recalibrated in our society right now. And how we look at our careers is probably one of them. And so that kind of helped me understand where to start, and how do we challenge our assumptions about the world? How do we challenge our beliefs about the world, and become the architect of our values, right? Where we start to really get conscious about, what do I want to value? Where do I want to spend my time? What is important to me? Instead of just operating from a program that was largely written before we were conscious of it.
not just personally so important, but also in a business world that we are emphasizing, especially in today's society with social media and everything, how authentic we have to be and how we have to function from our own self. So, with that being said, how can somebody be so authentic and with the storytelling develop a brand? And if they're not really themselves, they're struggling with themselves a little bit, but they have something to go and they want to be authentic. How do you separate that, or do you say like, you know what, go authentic? If you don't do it good, people are gonna get to know you, people are gonna grow with you, your audience is gonna grow with you and they get to know you. How is that work?
Well, I love authenticity. This is a tricky topic, though. There was a study that was done a few years ago that found energetic resonance in a human being was strongest when they were aligned or authentic to who they really were. That energetic resonance was actually stronger than what we call love, which love is an interesting word as well, and very much abused in our society. But that would tell me that authenticity is where our power is. And I would probably guess the more aligned we are with what real love is, it probably aligns closer to authenticity, is that they're probably more aligned than not in their purest expression. But nonetheless, authenticity is where our power is at. However, like many words in our society, it can easily become bastardized and turned into something that it's not. Being authentic does not give you permission to be an asshole, right? And sometimes people will be sloppy, they'll be lazy, and they'll be rude and call it being authentic. Um, I don't think those are the same things. And so you could say I'm being authentic, I'm being my authentic self, but nobody likes me. Well, you may want to reevaluate how you're showing up. So I think you'll find your tribe the more honest you are about who you are. But that also means being authentic does not mean that you shouldn't keep growing. It doesn't mean that you couldn't improve, right? And so sometimes it's a lazy way to not change and to not grow. I'm just being myself. Okay, you could do that. It may limit your reach and your influence, and that's nobody's fault but your own. And sometimes I'll see this where people will say, well, I'm just being me and nobody likes me. You may want to reevaluate why that is, right? You may want to understand, what is it that I'm missing? What is it that I don't see? Instead of thinking it's everyone else. There are exceptions to that as a whole, but I would principally start there. And so I think the message is be authentic, be true to who you are, be honest about who you are, but continue to improve and learn and take feedback. And as you do that, if you do that correctly with an open heart, you'll grow and learn. And there's people who come on that journey with you. There's nothing more motivating to me than seeing people continually recreate and reinvent themselves. Well, meaning they're constantly growing and learning in such a way that they never stop. Right? There's a constant unfolding that's there. It's one of the reasons I named my company Phoenix, because it reminds me to do the same thing, to be born anew daily, to continue to grow, to continue to learn. Don't get stuck. Don't get dogmatic. Don't get bureaucratic. One of the operating procedures we have in our company is, if we ever use the line or any variation of the line, that's the way we've always done it, or because that's the way we've always done it, it's time to reevaluate why we're doing something. But anyway, I have a lot that I could say about that, but I think authenticity is important, but I think it's largely misunderstood.
No, I love that the way you said that, and authenticity, and I can so vouch for that. Authenticity does not mean you have to be sloppy. And I've seen so many people that are come in and either dress appropriately or speak appropriately or being like you said, that's not authentic. That just you just being very sloppy. And especially now, and me and you would be having this conversation and it was such a good time because I was just literally watching the show The View. Okay. Now those ladies, like, listen, they were consider themselves authentic. We speak of anything, but at certain point, that's not authenticity. You are giving your opinion in a such an insultive way to someone and claiming for your audience to look at you as, well, I'm authentic and this is, I can say whatever I want.
Yep. Yeah.
And that can fire back on you.
100%. Well, the problem with becoming a personality, and building a brand around a personality. And I've coached enough people in that space to know you can become a slave or get trapped in your personality, meaning you've created a brand for yourself that everybody expects for you to show up a particular way that literally can limit you in your ability to continue to grow because it suddenly becomes off brand, right? Where it's like you see this with musicians very often. Musicians who started writing in their early years and their formative years in their 20s, as they get older, especially if they've gone through therapy and they've continued to grow, a lot of times they don't even resonate with their music anymore because they're healed through a lot of what they were going through, and it was an important time in their life. It may even help them heal or cope. But then they change their music style and they're no longer relevant, or their bass feels like you've lost it, you've sold out. It's because they're changing and growing. And this is the case. And with personalities, the same thing can happen. You position yourself as being a particular kind of flavor or character, and then you're stuck in it. And if you don't show up that way, then you're not liked, or you're misunderstood, or your brand suffers. And so a lot of times people will continue to double down on the things that people know them for, and they lose, ironically, their authenticity because they're no longer that person, or they've grown through it, but now they feel like they need to be that because that's what their audience expects for them. It's very tricky.
It
But yeah,
is. It is.
you see that a lot with strong personalities on television or social media for sure.
Oh yeah, especially if things on social media. I think it's good to have a little flexibility to show up authentically, but at the same time, like you said, if you have that persona, and you can kind of balance those two. So if you go either way, your audiences are not surprised. It's not they're not like, oh my God, that came out of nowhere. So I think little flexibility is always good.
And I say this on a pretty regular basis. I reserve the right to change my mind about anything if I'm presented with information that makes me feel like I should. Right? Like I don't hold an opinion because I hold everything with a sense of I'm operating from the best principles that I understand and with the best information I have. But in light of new principles or new information, I will absolutely change my opinion. And so I think it's hilarious. You always see this specifically during political seasons, which we've obviously gone through a pretty crazy one, where politicians get judged for things they said 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And I laugh about that because I'm like, I really don't care for the most part what somebody thought or said, or in some cases even did 20 years ago. I very much care who they are today and what they believe today. And so, and if we're growing and changing, if we're growing in pursuit of betterment, we will often change our opinions. We will often upgrade our language. We'll often upgrade how we're looking at the world. And so, to hold somebody to a standard that says you're not supposed to have changed over the last 20 years, I think is pretty false and inaccurate if you just look at your own life. And so, I think it is important that you're honest with yourself first, and not worry so much about what other people think. Right? Be honest to who you are, and your tribe will come around you. Right? And the people that resonate with who you are today will find you. The bigger trouble is when you try to please everyone, because it's exhausting, and if you're trying to be something to everyone, which is impossible, you're losing out on who you actually are, and it's a much more exhausting position to be because there's a falseness in that takes energy to continue to support. It's not natural. Or if you're authentic and you're true to who you are, in a way, there's an ease to that because you're not trying to be something other than you.
You took the word out of my mouth. Like that's so true because once you're confident of yourself, then if people say something about you, it doesn't affect you as much because you know who you are. But most of the time, people get affected by other or become even people pleaser is because they are not confident of themselves, of what they do. And like you said, the persona or the identity or the authenticity is not there.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's pretty cool to understand. And for people that are listening right now, I'm sure there's a lot of people. We get a lot of question about how can I not care about what people said, and we talked about it. Like you said, once you know yourself, it's just like there's a point that you can say no. No matter what you say about me, either it was back in the days I grew, I'm not the same person anymore, or I know who I am, so your opinion doesn't affect me. So I think that comes from a healthy place versus just rejecting everybody's opinion or everything that people say about you, because that's how you learn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I would agree. And I use a rule of three when it comes to feedback. I genuinely, as a whole, don't I don't take things personal, right?
I
Humans are
agree.
humans having a human experience, and most of it I just laugh off as part of humans being human for a couple of reasons. But I do use a rule of three, where if I get the same feedback from multiple people, especially if they're in my social circles, like people operate not so much social media, but within my social circles, if I'm getting the same feedback from multiple people that are not connected to one another, that tells me there's a good chance they're seeing something that at least uh, is somewhat accurate, right? And so then it's like, well, even if I'm not, if that isn't my intention, why am I coming across that way, right? Or why are people seeing that? What am I doing, or how am I complicit in creating this reality that multiple people are seeing the same thing in me? That way, I continue to learn and to grow, because my intention is to reach, to influence, and impact. And so I like feedback. I invite feedback. I don't chase one offs, and I don't generally care. Feedback on social media is a little bit different, good or bad. But specifically within circles I work in, I want to take that feedback and go, well, where is the grain of truth in this? What am I maybe missing about how I'm showing up, or my conversational style, or how I said something? And that helps me constantly improve. Social media, whether somebody is saying something positive or negative, my feedback is almost always the same. My response, if I respond, which I don't 99% of the time, but is to simply say thank you for your feedback. I don't really take praise too seriously, and I don't take criticism too heavily. It's humans showing up as human, and I don't take more of it than that usually.
Sounds like you're very grounded. And that's what grounding means. Not
Yeah.
to get too excited or not to get too devastated, have that neutral feelings. Uh, and that makes you always win. So what are some tips do you have for people to kind of bounce back from the failure?
Well, I failure isn't final unless you quit. I I get asked a lot about failure, and I it's interesting. I can't help but think that our academic system probably didn't help us out here much. But within academia, you generally are on, it's a binary scale, right? You're either good or you're not. You pass or you fail. And so as a result, it's easy for us to create association with failure that makes it seem final, and something to be avoided. When in fact, if we just slow down a little bit, we step back, we realize there is nothing that we've done that we're great at now that we did not fail our way to getting there. Right? It's like, so the silly example that I say quite bit because it makes people laugh is simply like, did any of you, if I'm in a room full of hundreds of people or more, I'll always ask, did any of you come out of the womb just running, right? Running and jumping. And if, exactly, people laugh and they're like, no, no, you came out slobbering, couldn't even change your own diaper or roll over. And then you learned how to roll over. Then you learned how to get up on all fours. Then you learned how to crawl. And so that is the process, right? We fail our way to success. And so I look at failure like as an opportunity to learn. And I want to take, when I fail at something, I want to step back and go, what is it that I did not see? What is it that I did not solve for? Is this an effort thing, or is this a skill thing? What am I missing? And so I think failure is an opportunity to learn. And I think it's easier to learn in failure than it is in success. Success very often blinds us to things, which is why a lot of people will experience a taste of success and then collapse because they begin to read their own press and they think they're better than they really are. And they stop learning thinking they've arrived. Failure is an opportunity to grow and to learn. And if you receive it that way as feedback, then it becomes a stepping stone to continue to move forward and get to another level. And so I think it's more your story about what failure means. Um, it's wild to me that so many, especially it seems to be younger and younger, we're becoming more afraid of rejection and failure. Again, I don't know any successful person in any circle that I'm part of that did not get there through an extreme amount of rejection and failure.
Absolutely. No, that's so true. Even like the little babies, when they walk, they're like a drunk. They fall so many times and they get up and they fall again and they get up. And the fun part, I always say, I say this story of like be child minded except for being childish. You know,
Yeah.
it's just like they're so brave. They don't care. No matter how many times they felt, they get up and they try. They don't time themselves. They don't rush to things. They just take their own time. Even the parents are like, "Come on, They just do it on their own, but eventually they get there.
And how weird would it be if a parent was sat and watched their child and go, you know what? I just don't think they're going to be a walker, right? Don't think they're. I mean, like, how silly is that? Unless
Right.
right, unless somebody has a physical impairment, everyone learns how to walk. Right?
And this,
What weird conclusion to be like, oh, they're not going to be a walker. Of course they're going to learn how to walk. It's just a matter of time.
right, right. And they being a child know that they don't care. They really don't care, and they take their time. They become so precise to do so. And like I said, child minded, but not childish. And if we can look at everything like that, you fail, okay, you fail, get back up again. You're gonna
I
fall
love that.
probably
It's a
again.
beautiful way to say that.
Yeah. And and that's how because I have kids and my kids are one every time I see something and I'm like, they don't care. They eat whatever they want. They like walk around with a little tummy buffed up. They don't care how the body looks. They don't care. They have too little hair here, you know?
Yeah, I love it.
And the freedom of their spirit is so free. They're so curious about the world. And the beautiful thing about that is as a grown up that a lot of people should learn from that is to they're so in the present moment. They do not care about tomorrow. They forgot what happened yesterday. They're so focused on what they're doing right now. And if everybody can just do that alone, it will eliminate a lot of anxiety because we're so anxious of the future or we dwell over the past so much.
Yeah, beautifully said. And I 100% agree with you. Like, children can be our greatest teachers. And the tragedy that happens to so many of us as we grow up, we're then indoctrinated into an adult version of the world that is highly dysfunctional. But you're right. When children come in, they have a base operating system, but they do not come in with judgment. They don't judge people. They pay attention to energy, but they don't judge people. They tend to be much freer. They're much more in the present moment. They deeply experience emotion, but it processes through, right? 90-second waves. So they'll feel whatever they're feeling, but it doesn't stay unless there's something that's continual. They'll feel it, they let it go, and they keep going. They fall down, they cry, they get back up, and they're laughing the next minute. Like, there's a lot of lessons that we could learn from children. And then, unfortunately, in the name of what we think being a good parent is, we indoctrinate our children with a bunch of bullshit that they're going to have to process later in life and probably go to therapy for to get rid of. Which I got asked this question I get asked this question pretty regularly, but people are worried about, the teachers having an influence on their kids, or coaches having an influence on their kids, or other people in general having influence over their kids and being hyper vigilant. I have three boys, so I know this well. I was talking to a friend of mine he's a world renowned therapist and has been for like 35 years. And I was asking his take on that, and he smiled, and as he normally does, very sagely responds to me. He goes, Sebastian, I've been a therapist for 35 years, and I can safely say that I don't think I've had anyone come in and want to talk about their coach or their teacher. Everyone wants to come in and talk about their parents. And that hit me as a parent. That hit me so hard. Like, wow, the responsibility we have um, to raise our children, and we're going to do the best that we can, and we're going to fuck it up. Yes, my goal is that I don't want my children to have the same problems I had. Right, that to me is the win. At least we're moving the ball forward, and they're getting to confront new issues, not the same issues. If we're confronting the same issues, it means I'm not doing the work and I'm just passing it on. And so that really is my focus, and not indoctrinating my children into a worldview that's based on my traumas or my pain or how I think they should be, but really support them in becoming the best versions of themselves. And I think my children have definitely been one of my greatest teachers.
No, mine too. My God, mine too. And then, like I said, their behavior you can see, and that's a great thing to say. Like you said, just be there for them, help them. They're gonna go through stuff, no matter how hard we try, no matter how hard me and you try. It just sometimes they will go through difficult things, and I think that's healthy. They learn on their own, and I don't think parents should look at it as in like, oh my God, the world is ending and that's it. But I think as we grow older and they see them, they'll survive. They're going to be okay. So there are a lot of young listeners, young adults are listening to us right now. If you're planning to have babies or if you do have children, don't be too nervous. They're going to be
They're going to be
okay.
okay. Yeah.
They're going to be okay. With that being said, now, what are some unconventional career paths you have seen people thrive in, and what makes them so successful? Because I know in the beginning of the conversation, we talked about education and everything, and now it's going to a different direction, especially with social media.
And to be clear, what do you mean by unconventional? Just not popular or rare?
Well, like as we said, back in the days, at least in my experience, a lot of parents, their kid having a job, doctor, lawyers, engineers were very popular. Okay, if they have, I'm proud of you. But then all of a sudden, this kid comes out and say that I'm a musician, or
Yeah,
I'm like building this thing, and they're like, no, or I'm an astrologist, or I'm like
yeah,
a tarot reader. And
yeah,
I do interview a lot of them that are very successful, but that's one of the things that people think about even now, as modern as we are, it's not as accepted as it should be, because you can see a lot of them are successful. So
yeah.
what do you think of that?
I think I think I'd start with creating a frame here. We're living in a very unique time in human history. As far as I can tell, we've only been here two other times. This is the third go around, though I reserve the right, in light of new information, to change my mind on that. From what I understand, that's the case. In this millennia of history, I don't think I can quickly recall a time in which every major institution is being challenged and distrusted at the same time. We don't trust our government. We don't trust academia. We don't trust capitalism. We don't trust healthcare. We don't trust scientists. We don't trust the medical system. Right? Pervasively, this is becoming increasingly more common. We don't trust our media for good reason. But there's a lot of distrust in the world. We're in the middle of our fourth turning. We're at the top of a long-term debt cycle and a short-term debt cycle. Translation, we're in the middle of massive change. And change is always very scary. It's part of the human condition. We don't like change. We take it kicking and screaming, which is ironic because everything is always changing, right? But sometimes there's more change in a year than there is in 100 years. We study history. And we're in one of those. The baby boomer generation, a lot of their framing to what made the world work was post-World War II US economy, which did work for about a generation and hasn't worked, and has declined ever since, from Gen X, millennial, and it's just getting worse. Our school was really built on a Prussian military framework, and everything was graded in labor as far as hours, time and energy in labor, uh, because we were going through the Industrial Revolution. I don't say any of that to demonize it. It was just the season we were in. And it did help catapult the United States into the predominant economy that it has been for some time. But things have radically changed since that frame. And most of the current kind of cultural norms were set by the last generation, and they get passed down. And so this idea of trading time and energy in the form of labor, to build a career and a life for yourself is largely irrelevant. Working hard isn't, but the 9 to 5 labor code was built on physical labor. We're in the knowledge era. In the knowledge era, it's a completely different style of economy. And which is why, like, a lot of economists are puzzled by why our economy continues to go up, even though our productivity person to person is dropping. It's because our entire economy is changing. More is being done by robotics and AI and bots, and less is relying on labor. And that's confusing, especially if you grew up in a market where you didn't learn a high value skill set, or you're trying to trade pay for a job that's not based on a high value skill set, but you just trading time and energy. Human time and energy in the form of labor is becoming less and less expensive, meaning we're willing to pay less and less for it because we have robots and automation that will do a lot of that for us. As a result, a lot of the old school kind of career choices don't add up the same way. More importantly, there are more choices and more opportunities that weren't available even 50 years ago that people can do. We're trading more for experiences and information and less for labor and products, right? Like, as a whole, products are getting cheaper and cheaper. Think flat screen television. Even a decade ago was probably a $10,000 television. Now you can get them for under $1,000, and I'm sure Black Friday it'll be way less than that, right? We're paying less for things, but more for experiences. We're paying less for labor, but more for results. And so as a result, the whole world has changed. And so there are career choices that are now viable, especially when you're connected through technology, you're connected to people all over the world. Your market is way bigger, which means it's much easier to find and relate to people all around the world, find your tribe and find your customer all over the world. So things are radically changing. And I think it's really exciting, but it's shaking up a lot of our cultural norms. And there's still a lot of uncertainty, or in some cases, even shame that people are going down a particular path and not doing the old school, go to school, get good grades, go to college, get good grades, go work in a career for a big company and hope that you can retire there in 30 years. I think we're waking up to the fact that that isn't the only path, and it likely is not the best path anymore. There are much better paths, but it does take a recalibration of how you're looking at the world. And we will pay as a society for people who are excellent at about anything. If you are truly excellent at what you do, the world will find a place for you. If you don't believe me, no disrespect to Tiger Woods or LeBron James, but Tiger Woods puts a tiny little white hole or a tiny little ball in a tiny little white hole, and he made hundreds of millions of dollars for doing it. I
Mhm.
don't think he's solving world peace or world hunger being great at golf, but he's entertaining us and he's getting paid a lot of money to do it. Right? LeBron, easily one of the best basketball players of all time. Really fun to watch. I'm going to go watch him tomorrow night, actually. But same thing. It's like he's putting a ball in a basket. I don't know that he's solving any huge problems doing that, but we're willing to pay him because it's entertaining. And so there are lots and lots of opportunities if you're excellent at something to make money doing it. And I think the other thing you mentioned astrology and tarot readers and things like that, because there's more and more distrust for what we would call contemporary answers that are usually rooted in data and science in this day and age. The pendulum swings so far over to data and science for everything. We are now seeing this swing back because, one, there's more distrust for the data. There's more distrust for scientists because of all the corruption and that comes with it. And how we're changing our minds on things constantly. That people are looking for other answers, and they're looking for something that they're not finding in the current, what is mainstream. This is where you should be looking. And so I think a lot of those guys are getting a lot more attention and creating opportunity for themselves simply because people are looking for answers. And I think as a society, we may want to ask, why is that? Why do we seem to be at the limit of what science can answer or what the data suggests? And I think we're in the middle of an existential crisis, to be honest. And so people are looking for answers that help them make sense of their world. And so I do think there's a lot of different opportunities for people. But the fundamental takeaway for me, this was a very long-winded way of saying, if you are excellent at something, you likely can find your market, and that people are looking for answers. And so if you provide them an answer, even if it isn't true or not, one that makes them feel good, you probably have a market currently.
Definitely. It's going to be an unconventional career. They called it that, but excellent is excellent. If you're excellent at something, you always will be recognized. And I heard that even now, a lot of company marketing strategies changing as well, because if you send your resumes and when you ask for a job, they want to check your social media and they want to make sure that you're present in social media because they want to know. And what a clever way to clever way to look at this, because our advertising, that how many people do you know? And for us to connect with everybody. And back in the days, remember when we were young, they were saying that it's not what you know, it's who you know. And we kind of in a marketing strategy combining those two, being excellent, but yet also finding people and connecting with people and knowing them to give us that opportunity to actually practice those unconventional careers and finding our tribes and be excellent at it, instead of like, I mean, being a doctor and then you see the YouTuber makes more money than a doctor.
Yep. I mean, we're seeing the whole world's being recalibrated right now. And I think it's fun and it's fascinating. But you're right. There's a whole set of new careers that are coming out where guys they're way more financially successful than the old career paths.
And more younger too, much more younger. So, what is the new trend for the personal growth that you know of or you're practicing with your clients and with yourself that's coming up?
I don't know if it's a new trend. I think there are patterns to behaviors. We kind of go through cycles, but I think what I'm seeing more of is a return to spirituality, which I think has been happening for some time, but it's becoming more pronounced, where we're integrating kind of a postmodern world with spirituality and technology, which is fascinating. I think a lot of our fiction for the last 20 or 30 years has been telling this story, but I'm seeing a lot more of that. A lot of return to spirituality, a lot of return to meaning. Nietzsche was famous for saying God is dead, and he meant that as a lament. It wasn't an indictment on religion or a encouragement to science. There's a lack of mooring we have when we don't have an orientation towards the world that is superior to us. And so what God is, who God is, what it means to different people is still very much up debate as a whole. But this trend towards finding meaning and purpose that's usually rooted in some kind of spirituality or spiritual practice is back on the forefront. Now, I don't think that's new. I think these trends tend to cycle through history, but we are seeing that a lot more of that. And then there's a lot of a return to self care and a rebalancing of work, which isn't to say that we're not concerned about our careers or working hard, although we do see some of that. There's usually, when we react to air, we usually create more air, but there is this, I don't even want to use the word balance, but a recalibration of what is most important and our value system. And so I'm seeing a lot more self-care. I'm seeing people take care of themselves more and make more time for themselves, create more healthy boundaries, which, if it isn't a response to a trauma, I think in principle is a healthy thing. But I see a lot of dysfunction there, which is to be expected anytime we're kind of moving away from something into something else. So I see a lot of trend there. But again, I don't know that any of that would be new. It's just kind of where we are in the cycle, I would say, more than anything, the wheel of time, so to speak.
Well, your example of that. So, Sebastian, you are a father and a businessman. You have business. You're running around and doing all this stuff. How do you balance your life? What does they look like to you?
Yeah, I don't like the word balance, and I don't use it. When I talk to my clients about this, we go into this. If you look up the word balance in the thesaurus, what are other words that are like balance? Average, mean, median, equal. And I find it ironic that I don't think I've ever had anybody say, I just want to be average, but everybody says I want to be normal, right? Which is also the same thing. So I'm not a big fan of balance. And I don't mean this to be semantical. It's not. To me, it's more counterbalance. And so if I go like this week, I'm in Orange County. My office is in Orange County. And so I split time between here and Washington. Um, Here, I'm all business, baby. I'm going to be here for 4 days. I literally have 4 days that are blocked off. Almost every hour is spoken for. And so I go hard. Then I'm going to go home and I'm going to go hard with my family, where I will be highly limited on my phone. I won't be as accessible, and I'm spending time with my family. That isn't balance. That's counterbalance. It's like I'm countering the time I spent here with this. But I don't know anybody who's been wildly successful that did it in a balanced way. It's usually in different seasons of your life, different things are important. But to become excellent at something, you have to go all in. And there may be some rare exceptions to that, but they would be the exception, not the rule. And we live in a society that is obsessed with arguing for the exception, which I find super amusing. And I use the example. It's like, hey, if you jumped out of an airplane without a parachute, are you guaranteed to die? And everyone will go, no, there's a chance you'll live. And there have been people that have fallen out of airplanes, bounced on the ground, and lived, which is like, who knows why or how that happened, but it happened. They would be the exception. Does that make you want to jump out of an airplane without a parachute? No. But yet, when we talk in general principles, there are people who go, what about this? Or what about this? Or that didn't happen for me. And it's like, statistically, you would be considered the exception, not the rule. And the exceptions have their place. But if you take two people and one person makes decisions based on general rules or principles, and the other does the counter, their lives are going to be radically different. And one of them is going to have a life that does not make sense and will probably think isn't fair, because they're constantly betting on the exception, not the rule. But I'm not saying never to bet on the exception. There are places to strategically deploy that. But if you operate from that place, your life isn't going to make sense. And the older you get, the more confused you're going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I call it a priority too. It's important to prioritize. Like you said, you work now and then you go home and you did. And sometimes people say balance, then if you don't have a job, you're with the kids all the time. What is that going to do? Right? That's not going to
Yeah,
help you. Or if you
right.
have a job and if you don't have your kids and family, that's not going to help you either. But I think prioritizing what's important and one is connected to others. And then if you can function through that really good, then that creates either average or balance, or like you said, counterbalance, whatever it is, for you to at least be satisfied enough to, okay, my life is going great. And I
Yep.
heard that, I think one of the guys from Shark Tank says that I don't like when people talk about balance because there's no such thing as a balance. I go hard when have to work. I work, and when I have to be home, I have to do this. That's what I'm going to do. So I think a lot of young adult needs to understand that this perfect picture in their head that, oh, I have to have a balance in my life. You know,
And if I was in my 20s again, I would be going very hard on my career or my profession and getting myself financially set up
right?
before I did anything else. And I would do that in my 20s because most of what it takes to accrue wealth and financial freedom and develop your career, your business, your profession, most of it is time and energy. We tend to have more time and energy when we're younger. The older we get, the less we have, but not necessarily because we're getting older. It's because it's being diffused into more things. When we're young, we're not married, we don't have kids yet. That is prime time to go hard in setting yourself up for success. Unfortunately, that is not the message that a lot of kids are getting, and they're doing just the exact opposite. So they get into their 30s, they're physically unfit, they're overweight, they're in debt, and they haven't learned how to have great relationships. And now they're struggling in their 30s. And more often than not, they're blaming society, the government, somebody else for why this is, and taking a quick fix pill to fix all their problems. And it's not helping, which is why we have a health crisis in America, and we have a mental health crisis in America. Uh, Something isn't adding up, and we haven't quite acknowledged that the way we need to.
Well, Sebastian, this is why we had you over here to talk about it and educate our listeners that it is possible to be successful, like you said, and there's rules and regulation for that. If they can apply that in their life, they can create a life that they dream of. And this is why we have this platform and bringing the awareness to, especially our new generation. It's our duty to pass it. Where we're giving you some knowledge. Take the one that resonate with you, toss the one that doesn't. But I think it's so important. So thank you so much for taking time from your busy time coming over here and sharing your story and your knowledge with us to create a better life.
I appreciate it, Valerie. Thank you for having me. It was great chatting with you.
Thank you for tuning into Inner Power Insights. I hope today's episode inspired you to embrace your journey of personal growth and empowerment. If you enjoyed our conversation, please rate and review us on your favorite platform, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media at Coach Valerie Malone for behind the scenes content and updates. For more exclusive content and to support the podcast, consider joining our Patreon community at patreon.com/innerpowerinsights. Your support helps us continue to bring you inspiring stories and expert advice. Remember, your inner power is limitless. Until next time, keep growing and glowing.